how to start it?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay, thank you for coming. We are going to talk about the lungs and large intestine with just, basic stuff. Because, the reason I'm recording all this stuff, because I want to put it up on my YouTube channel so it's available to the rest of the world if they ever come around to getting to looking at it. But it's there. Yeah. The whole point is there. And nobody can say we didn't know it, because I put it up there. And so the reason why I give this talk right now is because this is the lungs and large intestine season. Okay, we use the 5 transformation theory. And in the 5 transformation theory, the basic premise is that everything manifests in the natural kingdoms, which includes our body, our internal organs, are a manifestation of the activity of what is called in the Chinese qi. And in the Japanese it's called ki, in the Indian it's called prana, and in the Western occult tradition it's called etheric forces. And these change according to the time of the year. In other words, 5 transformation theory is essentially looking at how the qi dynamic, the flow of qi, goes through these different stages of transformation in a set rhythm every year. Starting with, well, we'll start with now since this is where we are, and this is the metal season. Now when you're talking about metal and water and wood and fire and soil, we are not supposed to take that literally. Okay, those are descriptive pictures of the state of dynamics of the qi at that time. So it's not supposed to be literally fire or literally metal. It's like fire. The reason why it's called fire is because that's the most dynamic, actively powerful in terms of its range of movement of the 5 transformations. Then that's the peak. That's in the summer, and it says in the I Ching, not the I Ching, the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, the spirit of summer creates fire, and fire manifests as. And then then it changes, because that's the peak, and everything goes back to its opposite. Because we live in this, the earth literally breathes. Spiritually speaking, the earth literally breathes. It expands up to the height in summer, and then it contracts to the depths in winter. It literally does that, spiritually. So the fire season is the peak of that particular time of year, which is summer solstice, and then it starts to move back down and starts to condense. And the next major state of transformation is soil. And that starts around, well, here, in this neck of the woods, it starts around August the 1st, which coincidentally happens to be Lammas Day, which celebrates the first loaf of bread from this year's harvest. That's what Lammas Day celebrates. And that starts August 1st, and it goes to September the 21st. And then we have the more condensation, which is the metal season. Now that starts September the 21st. This is all approximate dates. And that manifests, now in the case of the soil, it manifests as the spleen, pancreas, and stomach. And when you're talking about these paired organs, in terms of the fire, it manifests as the heart and small intestine. The first of the pair is the yang manifestation, and the second of the pair is the yin manifestation, because they're paired complementary organs. So we have lungs and large intestine. Then that reaches its peak around about the winter solstice, and it turns back on the upward journey. You get the healthy, you're still in bad shape. In this culture, most people who think they're healthy have no idea.
It's true.
No idea whatsoever. So we have to assume that because we've had 28 years or 30 years or whatever it is of meat and potatoes and sugar and dairy food and alcohol and drugs and whatnot, that we have seriously disturbed the internal functioning of our organism. And it needs a breather, a long breather, to be able to kind of like recuperate, so to speak, or get itself together. So that's where you eat. Now, this way of eating, the strict way, the circumscribed, the clean, so-called way of eating, you do it only for a certain period of time, but that may be 3 years. And like in my case, it was 3.5 years. And I was only 28 when I started. But the general rule of thumb is that we do it for as many months as we are old when we start, up until a maximum of 7. But usually for most people, depending on what shape they're in when they start, 3.5 years, 3 years should be enough to really get through, or should I say, to get the body the enough time to be able to really revitalize itself and regenerate itself and detoxify itself. But the digestive system, since the digestive system bears the brunt of this assault of the modern dietary intake, it has a long time, needs a long time to rehabilitate itself. And it will only do that if we do the ginger compress regimen along with the dietary intake. The dietary intake in and of itself will not bring about the fundamental resolution of what I call chronic intestinal stagnation, which is in my book. You know, you have to get the end of medicine. I go into that in great detail. Because what I discovered through being taught, really I learned from the people I counseled, I learned this. I didn't learn it in any textbook. I learned it from the people that I was counseling. That the large intestine is the most significant of organ having to do with the process of illness and the process of healing. It is number one. And if we don't clear that up, and the dietary intake, macrobiotic dietary intake itself, will not do it. It will not. Because I've seen many people, you know, who, I've been macrobiotic, as I said, for 37 years now. And there's lots of people around who've been doing macrobiotics as long and as longer than I have, and they still have chronic intestinal stagnation because they never did that ginger compress regimen. And I'm not going to name any names because you can diagnose that for you. You can diagnose it for yourself once I teach you how to diagnose it. And what you will find if you start to really apply what I'm going to teach you tonight about diagnosis is everybody in the culture has chronic intestinal stagnation. Everybody. Without exception. And it doesn't matter how old they are. They all have it because that's how the body responds to the human organism. That's how it responds to a dietary intake of meat and potatoes and sugar and alcohol and dairy, etc., etc. That's how it responds. It's the natural response. So, it's there. It's what I call in my book the hallmark of modern times. Chronic intestinal stagnation.
It takes like 3 years to get rid of all that, you know.
If you do the ginger compress, right?
The ginger compress.
Along with the dietary.
Ginger compress on the directly.
Here, I'm gonna talk about it.
You know, and when you think about it, 3 years is a very short time considering how long it took for you to get to that place.
Yeah.
The body is very forgiving and very healing.
It heals itself really rapidly. I mean, rapidly.
Yeah, 3 years is not a long time.
Yeah.
It may look like a long time when you're looking at 3 years in front of you, but once you're doing it for 37 years, it's like 3 years. And it's nothing. But I can acknowledge that I thought, oh my gosh, 3 years, oh my gosh, you know.
But you know, like anything else, once you get your toe.
So that's what you see in the mirror, or that's what you
See is passing.
Yeah, this is the left side, middle, right.
One should be ascending.
Ascending here, A,
Okay.
B, C. So A comes up here. Now this isn't a normal human being such as it is, of which there are very few in existence. Normal healthy human being is, the ascending colon starts right here. You take your thumb, you put it on your hip bone, and where your thumb ends, that's where the ascending colon starts. It's called the ileocecal valve, and it's the junction of the small intestine and the large intestine. Colon. Large intestine also called colon. It comes up here, swings under the rib cage, turns the corner, slings across here, under the rib cage again, and then comes down, then it goes to the sigmoid flexure, and then to the rectum and out the back end. So you can diagnose that. You say which is the worst of the three. Now, the other thing is, everybody has lines in their lip, but they should not be noticeable. Because those tiny little lines, they correspond to the folds in the intestines.
Wow.
But if they become very noticeable, so that they're seen, and this is very common. That is diverticulosis.
Oh, wow.
Okay, that means that the chronic intestinal stagnation I talked about that was in here, it causes atrophy of muscles at certain places, and the muscles collapse, and the wall moves this way, and then you get fecal matter gathering in here, causing all kinds of problems. 40% of people over 40 in this country have diverticulosis, and it is a precursor of colon cancer. So you can diagnose this stuff real early. Now, that's the number one place that you look for diagnosis of the condition of the large intestine. Now, we're not going to talk about the small intestine today because it doesn't correspond to the, I did that in the heart and small intestine. But next year, I will do a talk on the digestive process itself, which will bring into account the relationship between the small intestine and the large intestine. Now, our wonderful Buddha, he starts to get decrepit. He starts to look a little bit worn down. Now, everybody has a line that goes from here to here, from here to here. Everybody has that. It's a human feature. If below that line it starts to swell up and get what's called bags under the eyes, that is general intestinal condition. But if it's swollen above this line, in this area here, where I'm going to black it out, I'm going to make it black, paint it black. By the way, talking about painted black, the stones are appearing in Newark
I saw that.
in December. The question for me is it the real stones? In other words, is Mick Taylor with them and is Bill Wyman with them?
I think so, from what
That
I
would
hear.
be great. So these areas that I blacked out, that corresponds to the kidneys. And there has to be a distinction made between the area that I blacked out and the area that I have not blacked out. Okay? Above that line is kidneys, and below it is a general intestinal condition. Now another human feature is that we all have a line etched from the corner of our nose to the outside of the lip. Everybody has that human feature.